Okay, everyone, welcome to the webinar. So as I just mentioned, my name's Glen Coates. I'm the founder and CEO of Handshake. We make software for manufacturers and distributors. We have both a mobile order writing app that reps use when they're with their customers in the field, and also a B2B e-commerce platform that retailers can use to place orders with their distributors online. I'm very excited to welcome Jonckheere from Showpad again after a great webinar we did last March on the new era of sales. And this time around, we're also very lucky to be joined by Paul McCabe, who is the president and CEO of Roland Canada, and who was an early adopter of both Handshake and Showpad. So we're going to be hearing from Paul about his experiences with both of them a little bit later on in the webinar. So today's topic on adding value is really a timely one because technology is rapidly changing the sales landscape. And many companies are really struggling to kind of figure out this ideal channel mix for their customers, and particularly, what is the role of the in-person sales appointment and how does that fit into this kind of rapidly evolving technology landscape? And that's what we're going to be spending time on today. Before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping things. We're going to last about 30 to 40 minutes on the presentation part of the webinar, and then we're going to have some time at the end for questions. So if you think of anything you'd like for us to cover, just pop it in the question box there, and we'll get to it at the end. So with that, let's get into the good stuff. So first up, we're going to start with why in-person sales is still so important, even in this digital age. Then Louis going to be sharing the 5 ways that sales enablement software adds value to the in-person sales experience. And then I'll be sharing how mobile order writing software does the same. After that, we're going to be hearing from Paul and his experiences running Roland Canada, why he chose to invest in these technologies, and his actual results that he's seen in the past few years. Then we're going to get into the Q&A. So why are we here today? It's very simple. Even though commerce in general, and that's both B2B and B2C, is moving online, today the in-person sales experience still remains like a really critical component of much of a B2B company's sales efforts. You know, I'm sure many of you out there have read that kind of Forrester report that came out a few months ago. It was entitled "Death of a B2B Salesman." It was a very, very scary title, dun dun dun, which predicted that 1 million B2B reps would lose their jobs by 2020, mainly due to the advent of B2B e-commerce. And they kind of argued that specifically that the order takers, quote unquote, would be the hardest hit. So there's been a lot of hype around this topic recently, and while the amount of B2B that is done online will inevitably increase over time, the same report also pointed out that the role of reps who add value and act as a strategic partner to their customers would actually become more important over time. And so if you believe this, and I'm guessing many of the people on the call today do, then the opportunity right now is to change the role of your reps into something much more than it used to be, something more strategic, something more value added. So let's dig into what it means to add value in person and why that matters. So first of all, sales, as everywhere in B2B, sales is always about people. For those of you on the webinar who sell to retail customers, you know how important relationships are in this business. The bond between a retailer and a supplier is built over shared successes, season to season, product to product line, year to year, over time. One of the other things in that Forrester report mentioned was that 93% of B2B buyers prefer buying online when they've already decided what to buy. But most of the largest purchases in B2B are the ones where the buyer has not yet decided. And no surprise, that's where a great salesperson is critical. We all know the kind of old adage, people buy from people. And it's really important to remember that. As we all know from our time spent at shows and out on the road, it's tough for a digital experience to compete with the emotional element and persuasive power of that, person-to-person, in-person conversation. As always, there's a lot of fear around the idea that technology is going to kind of replace humans, and there's always been that fear in every technological revolution in history. But the alternate point of view is, of course, that technology enhances humans. We know that some of the work that your team does in selling to your B2B customers is tedious and repetitive. Scribbling orders on paper, doing data entry, that's boring machine-like work. This is actually one of the big reasons that I started Handshake, the kind of underlying belief that people should do the interesting people stuff, machines should do the boring machine stuff. I've never met anyone who got into sales because they were really psyched on doing lots of data entry. Every salesperson I've ever met was really like a people person who wanted to add value. So instead of being afraid of how technology might change our industry, we should be thinking about how to use it to empower our people, especially those on the front lines, to add more value. And so there's been a lot of research done lately about the quote unquote omni-channel customer. What does that mean? So essentially an omni-channel customer is one that buys from you in multiple ways. And that could be in the field with your reps. It could be calling in to place orders with your inside team. Or it could be placing an order via your B2B e-commerce portal. One of the stats that jumped out at me from the Forrester report was that 60% of companies reported that their B2B buyers spend more overall when those customers interacted through multiple channels. And this intuitively kind of makes sense, right? The customer who has more ways to buy from you will on average buy more, just kind of pretty logical. But why might this be true? So we know that in every B2B relationship, there's kind of an ebb and a flow between the push and the pull. And the push is the bigger orders that are driven by your salespeople. And the pull is that sort of smaller demand-driven reorder that comes from your customer when the rep isn't around. The idea of that freebie pull reorder that comes through the B2B portal always sounds nice, but here's the thing. The strength of that pull channel is related to the performance of your product in their store, and that performance is driven by how well the product mix they stock fits their customers, how well they were educated on how to sell and merchandise that product, and whether that store has really committed to buying your product in sufficient volume to kind of move the needle for them and really promote it, or did they just buy a few SKUs and kind of leave them on a rack in the back of the store. In many cases, all the things I just mentioned really depend on how well your rep was able to engage with the store, understand their needs, show them how your product matches those needs, and kind of guide them through that buying process. We know that committing to large amounts of inventory from your brand is really nerve-wracking for buyers, and so helping those buyers through that journey is really the role of that sales rep. So creating an omni-channel customer who has a strong relationship to your company is all about having your salespeople add value and really create that strong upfront buy-in, which leads to kind of better sell-through and the willingness of the buyer to engage with you in multiple channels to keep that product flowing. It's tempting to think that if your reps weren't there and you stopped educating your customers about your product, that the volume would kind of stay the same and we could just, save a little on our commission checks. But I think we all know that that isn't really true. And so finding ways for the reps to add more value in the short time, that really short window that they have with their customers face to face, to lay the foundation for a strong omni-channel relationship is really today's mission. And so speaking of sales reps educating your customers on new product, it's really time for me to pass the mic over to Louis, who is the co-founder and CEO of Showpad, a company that is all about improving the reps' in-person conversation with their customer. Louis.
Perfect. Thanks, Glenn, for the introduction, and thanks for the great introduction. And I do agree. I mean, the B2B sales rep is about to die if he doesn't change, if he doesn't become more relevant to speak with his customers. And today, in the next 6-7 slides, I want to talk a bit about how enablement software can really transform your business. And with enablement, I really mean how do you make sure that your sales reps are super relevant and super powerful if they're having conversations with their prospects. Because, and this is a great quote of McKinsey stating that even we live in this digital world where a lot of the interactions happen online, and the main reason or the main driver while somebody in B2B is making a buying decision is the human factor, is the fact that he's speaking with a sales rep. So today I would like to talk about how do you enable that sales rep to be super successful. And I think before diving a bit deeper into how you do that, I want to start with speaking about the buyer, because the buyer has completely changed. And this is dramatically changing the role of a sales rep. And I think you all know that the buyer has become much more educated. He's able to find 60, 70, 80% of the information he needs to make a buying decision without ever speaking with a salesperson. So this really questions what is the role of a sales rep in this world. And as you will see in the next slide, traditional salespeople are really struggling with it. I think if you look at the change in the buyer, there are more decision makers, more people have an opinion, more people want to be heard, more people need to be talked to, and this makes the complexity for a sales rep even more difficult. And then thirdly and fourthly, processes are becoming much more formalized. And again, there's a huge politics in buying. Again, brought back to the fact that you have so many decision makers. So the buyer changed, and it changes dramatically how salespeople work. So sales reps need to change as well. And this is where enablement technology in general can make a huge difference. Because if you look at the slide here, this really states that the traditional sales rep, who is basically repeating what a prospect is able to find online, is dying. People, sales reps who are just pitching product, features, and price, year over year will lose their quota. So in the graph on the yellow line, you see that from 2013 to 2019, the amount of salespeople that missed their quota will become close to 100%. And that's really simple because those sales reps don't add any value to the conversation. They're not able to challenge a prospect. They're not able to challenge a customer. Now, the companies that will be successful in the 21st century will be companies that understand that their sales reps, and Glen already mentioned it, need to transform from order takers to consultants, to people who really understand the business and are able to have value-added conversations. And companies who are succeeding in this will have reps that make their quotas, will be companies that make sure they hit their revenues. And that's only possible if they're able to speak to those multiple buyers and be super relevant for every single persona and industry they speak with. But this is a pretty complex thing, and this is where sales enablement technology can really help you. And just to give you an example how this looks for Showpad. Showpad as a company, our sales reps, if they're speaking with their prospects, they're going into about 2,880 different kinds of conversations they can have. So to give you an idea, we sell into 8 different industries. Some industries have sub-verticals. If you look at medical devices, there you have 7 to 8 sub-verticals that are in there. If we're selling to a company, then we're also selling to multiple buyers. We're selling to the VP marketing, we're selling to the VP sales, to the sales operation person. And what we find out is that every person has different objections, have different insights, different goals, different questions, and it becomes super complex to make sure that your sales rep can really navigate those conversations. And this is where a sales enablement technology like Showpad is able to help you, because those are solutions that are able to put content in context. If your sales rep is engaging with a prospect from a specific vertical, he needs to know what to talk about. He needs to be smart enough to have a value-added conversation. Again, 70–80% of what the prospect needs to make a buying decision is found online, is found on the internet. And that's where a sales rep in this world can really make the difference. So having the right content at the right context and the right time is becoming super, super crucial. I think the second thing that you need to start thinking about if your reps are engaging with their prospects in the field is that the kind of interactions they have, the kind of sales conversations they have, needs to move from the traditional PowerPoint to really buyer-line selling experiences. Make sure that if your reps are engaging with a prospect, that it's a very dynamic conversation. Don't bore them with 5, 10, or 15 slides. Make sure there's a lot of interactivity taking place, that you're not only showing data, but that you also have the ability to interact with slides, interact with applications, and really make a very engaging conversation of it. I think some recent research indicated that a typical buyer has now the attention span of a goldfish. I mean, after less than a minute, if it's not interesting and engaging, he will give up. So make sure if you create your content, if you create your selling experiences, that they are much more engaging. And that's where a good sales rep can make the difference in the field, but also through remote selling. And this is really what we do with Showpad, right? If we are delivering sales experiences, if we're delivering playbooks, we want to make sure that the reps have the ability to not only be super relevant, but also take the prospect on a journey in a very interactive selling experiences through playbooks, through applications, etc. So this really comes to place to rethink how you sell, rethink how you create content, and rethink how you can engage with that specific buyer in that specific stage in the most powerful way. I think the third thing I would like to talk about is timely follow-up. And to give you some more insight, if you take a closer look at sales technology, one of the bigger things you're seeing is that the moment the meeting took place, the moment you had a great conversation with your prospect, you're mostly sharing materials. You're mostly sharing presentations or case studies or videos. And modern technology gives you the ability to see what's happening after that meeting. It gives you the ability to find out, okay, I have been speaking with 6 different people at a company. I've shared them a case study, I've shared them all this collateral. Who is following up with what? Are they looking at my presentations? In which products are they interested? Are they looking at the sales order? And that level of insight post-meeting is allowing reps to be super relevant again, to make sure if they follow up, because a recent study of CSO indicated that about 35% of a sales rep's time is spent on following up on the wrong kinds of opportunities. This could be a huge difference for your company. So make sure you get insight in what is happening after a meeting, and then allow your reps to follow up with timely and relevant actions, and make sure they are more powerful after the meeting as well. The fourth thing is optimizing the buyer experience, because basically sales enablement technologies gives you a complete insight in what's happening during a meeting and after a meeting. If your reps are presenting on an iPad through a remote selling solution, marketers, sales operation people, sales managers have the ability to see what is happening, and which presentations are they using, about which products are they talking, and they have visibility into what content, which products really engages customers. So use that data to create better feedback. And also make sure that if you deploy a sales enablement solution, that you think about the feedback of a sales rep. If you traditionally look at B2B sales and marketing organizations, the only moment when sales reps really give feedback about content, about stuff marketing is doing, it's happening on a sales kickoff. And that's where 80 to 90% of the collaboration happens. Really think about how collaboration through sales enablement can make a difference here, because your reps are on the field. They are the warriors. They're speaking with your prospects, and they know better than anybody else what is happening. So this is super important to take in mind as well. And then ultimately, the moment you have a great insight in which content resonates with your buyer, with your salespeople, what is being used, what is not being used, optimize it. Rethink your content strategy. Rethink how you want to engage with your customers. And ultimately make your sales process a lot more data-driven. Because currently, without enablement software, without these modern technologies, sales is operating in the dark. And most of the prospects we speak with don't have any idea what their reps are doing. They don't have any idea how prospects are engaging with collateral after a meeting. The moment you have that information, the moment you really know what's happening, you can change everything. A ton of our customers have recreated their content, have rebuilt their sales process based on the idea and the fact that they get insight in how reps are actually really selling. And this is something tremendously powerful for any sales and marketing organization. So Glenn, I think it's back to you.
Awesome, Louis. Really appreciate it. And there's a lot of stuff in there that I think when we get around to talking to Paul in a few minutes, it's gonna ring true. I think just the idea of how little time we have with our customers and making sure that we're following up on the things that matter, and even being able to know what things mattered is super critical, and great job. Cool. So I'm going to dive a little bit into mobile order writing software, which is one of our core products here at Handshake. For those of you who don't know much about mobile order writing software, it's pretty straightforward. Brands that are selling B2B load up their catalog on an iPad or an iPhone, and then they can, when they're with their customers, they can write orders right there on the device instead of using an order form or an Excel file or any kind of old school alternative. It's most commonly used out in the field during an in-person sales conversation, and that's going to be out on the road or maybe at a show. So before I talk about the actual software, I'd like to kind of think about one of these appointments from the customer's point of view, because we're always talking about the sales rep, but let's think about, like, what does a customer want to get out of the time that they're spending with one of your reps? I think ultimately they really just want to get the best possible product mix for their store. They want to be educated on how to best sell that product mix to the consumer, and they want that appointment to be quick and easy so they can get on with their day, whether that be seeing other vendors at a show or getting back to running their business. So let's take a quick look at how a mobile order writing app can help your reps deliver on this and add value. So the first thing is that writing an order on mobile is highly personalized. Reps that prepare for their customer appointments by reviewing the customer's order history and favorite items come into appointments ready to write a more strategic order focused on tailored suggestions and upsells based on an actual understanding of what's actually going on in this account, rather than what's worked for the last 20 people they saw on the road. So since mobile order writing software requires you to upload your customer list with the account specific details before you go into the sales appointment, each time your rep opens up the app to sell to a customer, they're selling the right stuff at the right prices under the right terms. We know that reps have to manage a lot of accounts, and remembering every detail of each customer is more or less impossible. So having software that allows them to personalize the meeting for the customer not only feels good for the customer, but also helps that meeting be more effective. So just diving in a little deeper, this means things like account specific pricing, so the reps don't have to kind of call the office to figure out what is the price for this guy, is he even allowed to buy this product. It's getting the shipping and invoicing terms correct, so that once the order's written, there's not going to be a hold up in processing the order. And then just having the customer notes on hand, so that reps, managers, customer service team can kind of flag important details about prior visits, make sure that the rep isn't kind of going back over territory that's already been covered when they walk into that meeting, which helps it run more smoothly. This is great for you and the rep because it doesn't require the memorization of all these details over hundreds and hundreds of customers. But it's valuable for the customer because writing that order becomes quick and accurate. And we know that customers hate back orders, and this is a great way to minimize that risk. Next up, the order writing experience when you have a mobile order writing app can become a lot more visual. So for the kind of post-Instagram generation, the idea of seeing photos on a mobile device might seem pretty basic, but many reps are unable to provide this to their customers because of the sheer size of the catalogs they have to lug around or the limits on the amount of samples they can carry. A digital catalog is much faster and, I might be biased, but a lot more fun to navigate through. Your customer can get exposed to much more of your product line, have the ability to discover complementary products along the way. Oh, sorry, I might have been on mute there for a little while. I'm going to backpedal a little bit. With the digital catalog, the products are going to be represented with multiple angles of high quality images, and customers can zoom in and really get a feel for exactly what they're buying. And then after the appointment, mobile order writing apps allow you to send an email confirmation of your order as soon as it's written. So without fail, every time I'm talking to a Handshake customer, they always comment on how happy and surprised their customers are with the immediate receipt of the order confirmation. And that's especially because of the thumbnail images that are on that confirmation, which allows them to kind of click and get that full zoomed in version. That is a very big difference to a pink carbon copy paper that is, not easily legible. So it's kind of a night and day there. We've already talked a little bit about how preparation before an appointment can make a big difference, but let's focus on access to information during the appointment. Um, Real-time access to order history means that your customers don't have to remember what they ordered last time, and your rep becomes a valued source of account-specific intelligence. Many reps using order writing software do a quick duplication of an old order as well. So that adds and they can add items where necessary, move them where necessary, but that really speeds up the order writing process. Next up, having favorite items in your mobile order writing tool should also flag the items that your customer has been ordering most often. So if your rep's halfway through an appointment, a quick look at this report will help them suggest other tailored product recommendations backed by data that your rep and customer can see together. It's not a hunch, it's real data. And last of all, this is pretty basic, but inventory levels. Many brands are able to expose inventory levels on each of their products during the appointment, so the reps know what is actually available to sell, what's running low, and what's out of stock. And everyone wants to avoid back orders, but if you're going to do a back order, at least know that it's going to be that, so that everyone can be on the same page about that during the appointment. Um, and now let's move to probably what will be one of the biggest perceived points of value by a customer. Writing orders on mobile will save them time. Um, in chatting with Paul to prepare for this webinar, he brought up a sentiment that we hear from many of our customers, that retailers are often trying to minimize the time they're spending with suppliers because they've got to maximize the time they're selling to their own customers. It's so important for you to find ways to save them time and be respectful of their time in the appointment, and that's why it's important that mobile order writing software is actually faster. Um, First of all, scrolling through a digital catalog is just faster than flipping through a paper catalog, and fumbling through your bag to find those physical samples. Tapping items or scanning barcodes to add them to the cart is much quicker than physically writing down the SKUs and the descriptions and all that stuff on carbon copy paper. One of our customers, it's a convenience store distributor named Cooper Booth, and we've done actually a webinar with them not too long ago. When they switched over to Handshake, they cut down the reorder writing process from 30 to 45 minutes to 15. And I even remember when I started building Handshake, the only requirement that we had for the early product was that it had to be faster than paper. That was like literally the only requirement, and it's for this reason. I already mentioned this in a previous slide, but just to reiterate, the ability to duplicate a past order and tweak as necessary saves a ton of time in the appointment. We know that reorders are a big part of wholesale, and so having mobile apps that make that easier is very, very important. And last of all, we just talked about the order confirmations when we were talking about how visual it is, but it's also an important element of the time savings for your customer. Receiving that confirmation right away not only gives your customer peace of mind that the order was written as they expected, but it's also a big contrast to the time that they've traditionally had to wait for that confirmation from a manual order. One of our customers is a brand called Kitsch. They're in the hair accessories industry, and they used to come back from shows with piles of paper orders. It could take a couple weeks before they could even send one of those confirmations to their customers, and now they're getting it instantly. The final point is probably the most critical thing to take away when thinking about the value that mobile order writing software can bring to the in-person sales conversation. And it's coming back to something I said earlier in the webinar, that we really want our mobile order writing software to automate away as much as possible of the data entry, kind of boring stuff that your sales reps shouldn't be wasting time on when they could be talking to their customers. We've seen reps at top brands use the time they save in appointments from getting rid of those menial tasks to focus on much more strategic things, right? So the first thing is like sharing strategic insights based on actual data. So, a good example would be a rep being able to walk into an appointment and tell her customer that she is seeing camo backpacks performing extraordinarily well in the region, or maybe there's been a decline in interest in a particular style of flashlight, and that it might make more sense to switch to a different model. So this kind of data-driven insight that comes from having, the software on hand is something that allows your reps to be more consultative, during an appointment, and allows them to prepare with some real insights to share. The other thing that we've noticed with our customers is that the time savings they're getting back has allowed them to provide additional value-added services to their customers. So one of our regional sales managers from Silhouette, which is one of the eyewear and optical brands we work with, told us that her reps use their saved time to provide merchandising support and product training, so that Silhouette's brand really stands out in a way that they can actually control. Another great example, again, is Cooper Booth, the convenience store distributor I mentioned earlier. They've got a lot of in-depth knowledge about that industry, like what it takes to run a successful convenience store. And they've actually now got an arm of their business that has developed where they actually advise people who are opening up their first stores, and they kind of share best practices about how to make those retail stores successful. These are strategic services that are being initiated by the sales team, and they're able to do that because they've got the time, because they're not doing that menial work that they used to do, and that's really exciting. So look, at the end of the day, what does all this mean? It means providing your customers with more engaging, interactive, and informed conversations is ultimately just a better experience for them. You're saving them time, more transparency, and you're showing your products in a better light. This is the experience that your customers really want to have with you when they're taking the time to see you in person. And so on that note, I'd love to introduce Paul McCabe, who, as we mentioned, is the president and CEO of Roland Canada. Paul was an early adopter of mobile order writing and sales enablement software, and he's a customer of both Handshake and Showpad. So we're going to hear a little bit more about Roland's story here. Some of the pains the sales team was going through before they adopted both technologies, what drove them to kind of make that change, and then some of the results they've seen in the value add to their customer base. So welcome to Paul.
Thanks, Glenn. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So look, I know a lot of people on the call have probably heard of Roland already, and I'm definitely a big music geek and love the company. But could you give us a little, just for everyone's context, a little bit of background on yourself and on the company?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks. Roland is a high technology musical instrument and digital video products manufacturer, as well as doing audio production. The main segments that we participate in are musical instruments. We call it MI, and professional audio visual, or Pro AV. Probably a lot of people have seen our products before. We're very fortunate to be strongly associated with the entertainment industry, the music part of the entertainment industry, and so we tend to have a lot of visibility on television shows and, of course, on concert stages, music videos, and what have you. We're a Japanese company. Roland doesn't sound too Japanese, but we are indeed a Japanese company. Personally, I oversee the Canadian operations, and then I'm also involved in product development and our global marketing strategy.
Awesome. And you've been running Roland Canada for a little while. Could you tell us a little bit about your vision for how you want Roland Canada to behave and to interact with its customers? I think we've talked a lot over the years about this, but I'd love for you to share some of the interesting thoughts you've got on where you see that going.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. There's a few thoughts that come to mind here. First of all, our products are technology products. Our brand image is strongly associated with high technology. And I suppose I can say that it's always been an aspiration, a goal, that the way that we do our business is in alignment with our brand image. And when I look at how the sales order process and basically the general customer interactions were conducted, if I go back as recently as 5 or 6 years ago, they still lived largely in the analog world. There was a lot of paper involved, a lot of kind of landline telephone involved. And that really didn't resonate strongly with our brand image. I'm personally a paperless guy, and I've been that way for many years, and so I know the personal value of being able to move out of paper and into digital, and I really aspired to see our sales process transition to that as well. I'm always sensitive to the balance between efficiency and effectiveness, and I personally believe that in many cases in business, that well-applied technology can bring a better balance between efficiency and effectiveness.
Cool. So we're going to get to that in a minute. And the other thing that I wanted to share with everyone on the call is just I know that the Roland sales team is kind of broken up in a pretty unique way. It's not just like you've got one type of rep. Could you just give us a little bit of color on how that works?
Sure, you bet. There's a few different teams that we've got facing the customers. A lot of the conversation in this presentation is centered around the sales rep. Lots of different ways that's described. The field sales rep, the manufacturer sales rep. We've got a team of manufacturer sales representatives that are fully employed by Roland. They're not contracted resources, and they live and work in various different regions of our great country, Canada here. They are shadowed by two teams of people split between Toronto and Vancouver, which is where our physical offices are located, and that's the inside sales team. And the inside sales team is primarily there to do a combination of support the activities of the manufacturer sales rep working out in the field, but then they also have their own proactive sales responsibilities where they are focusing their energies proactively on keeping contact with the smaller accounts. There's hundreds of smaller music stores across the country that are just impractical for the field sales rep to visit on a regular basis. The third group of people would be our product sales specialists, and so if we can kind of group the manufacturer sales reps and the inside sales team together and say that their primary angle for selling and interacting with the customer is based on the relationship with the unique customer within a region. The product sales specialists, their power base is the products, the categories that we participate in. Roland participates in 15 or more different categories, from percussion to guitar, synthesizers, dance and DJ, video, pro audio, you name it. And so we have product sales specialists who, from their understanding of the category, the technologies, the customers, and the applications, then sell our products from that base.
Got it. So you've got the kind of traditional outside team, the traditional inside team, and then you've got this support layer of almost like product specialists, or in software we would probably call that a sales engineer, but it's that real expert on a particular category that you need, because Roland's products are in some cases pretty advanced and need that depth of explanation. That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for that. That's really helpful. So kind of getting back to like what were the changes, and what were you seeing in the business that really kind of led you to Handshake and Showpad in the first place? Like what prompted you to kind of go looking?
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, I'm personally I adopted a primarily paperless workflow, a discipline towards just trying to move paper off my desk as quickly as possible many years ago. I'm very confident of the benefits of that workflow. I haven't tried to impose that on others. At least I don't think I have. Others might argue differently, but regardless, I personally experienced the benefits both on the efficiency and the effectiveness sides of the ledger in moving to paperless. I wasn't losing documents. I could quickly find information that had come across my desk. It was more easy to share information that I felt important to others. And just a general sense of organization and staying on top of things were some of the wins for me. So when the iPad came out, on the family side, on the consumer side, we were, within the first month of the iPad being available, we had one in our home for my wife. I saw it as just a great, convenient replacement for the home computer for her that would give her, web browsing and email and communication and quick access to information. But of course, as I was considering all of that, it was almost impossible for me to separate the potential benefits from the business side. If all of these were benefits in the home, why wouldn't they be benefits on the business side as well?
Yep.
But I have to say that despite my penchant towards being an early adopter of technology, and not just driven by budgetary considerations, I resisted bringing the iPad in early on. I saw a couple of organizations that were close to us bring iPads into their businesses very early on. But the introduction of the iPad was done more just to embrace cutting-edge technology, and it wasn't being brought in to answer a question, to solve a problem, to increase efficiency or effectiveness. It just made sense to have an iPad, so in it came.
Yep.
And what I ended up seeing was a couple of things. There was a lot of kind of head scratching once we got over just the fascination with the iPad. These organizations then. A lot of people inside those organizations began to build their own workflows, and some were storing PDFs of price lists and brochures in iBooks. Others were using other different third-party apps to organize themselves, but there was no cohesive workflow that was being engineered at a higher level and then being trained out across the sales staff. So I just kind of waited that out. The other thing that I was sensitive to was that I didn't, as a technology company, our customers are all technology fans as well.
Yep.
And I didn't want the iPad to become a distraction in that first year. I didn't want for the rep to walk in with an iPad and the conversation just to shift over to how cool the iPad was.
Right.
And for the sales conversation to lose its focus on our business.
Yeah,
So,
you see that all the time. I've actually seen that at shows sometimes when I'm down at a show and I'll see someone, using an iPad in a booth, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. What are you doing with that? And they'll be like, oh, I'm just answering my email, and they haven't really figured out how to kind of integrate it into the process yet.
Well, absolutely, and I mean, I'm currently seeing it. I was an early adopter of the Apple Watch as well, and honestly, I find myself wearing long sleeve shirts and rolling my sleeves down right now
Yeah.
when I'm talking to customers, just so that it's not the shiny object on my wrist
Yep.
that suddenly becomes the distraction of the conversation. So I'm very sensitive to that.
Yep.
So it wasn't until I began to focus in on some business wins that I became willing to introduce the iPad and in order of how they were introduced. The first was, can we move away from the paper order pad and all of the inefficiency and risk that can be associated with the paper order pad into the digital realm, and is there such thing
Yep.
as apps that are electronic order pads? And do you want me to continue on this point, or do you want to jump in for a second?
No. I
Glenn?
mean, I think it's important to understand how you kind of got to it. I think, I remember when you guys kind of first reached out to us, and I think you went through, I think, a pretty well considered kind of research exercise on the market at the time before you got to us, as I remember.
Yeah, I mean, I did probably what lots of technology fans call us, what you will, geeks. In Japan, we have a word called otaku, which is kind of like extreme geek. And so, what a lot of us will do, and just a lot of people involved in information technology in our businesses, is I jumped online and I started researching. Okay, it seems reasonable to me to think that the world is probably ahead of me on this question, and that probably people have started to build businesses around this idea of electronic order pads and digital order pads. And so I was Googling, and then I hopped into the App Store, and sure enough, I found at that time probably 5 or 6 different solutions. Downloaded most of them. A couple of them I crossed off the list pretty early on as being pretty homebrew, pretty quaint little applications, and
Yep.
below our needs. But as I went through that process, I very quickly zeroed in on Handshake as being, at that time, pretty much the most mature, most full-featured, cloud-integrated, cloud-backed solution. And so, yeah, as you kind of suggest, I downloaded, signed up for a trial account, and for the sake of the story, I'll say within seconds, my phone rang. It was probably half an hour, but it really wasn't much more than that. And I was getting a call from New York. And it was yourself, and you were saying, and I think it was something like, so is this the Roland that I'm thinking about, because I'm a music fan, and I had to say, yeah, this is the Roland.
Yeah.
And
I
so
remember
just
that. It's pretty cool.
yeah, so just immediately it was a very engaging process, and really there was no looking back.
Yeah.
Um,
And so
do
I
you
remember,
want me to?
yeah, I
Sorry, go ahead.
remember you kind of at the time it was kind of obvious, like you wanted to kind of digitize some of the kind of the order writing processes, and it was very on kind of off brand for you to be doing it the old way. I was wondering if you could talk some of the folks on the call through, like, what the results have been of changing that process to digital, and what are the real ways that's kind of actually helped the reps in the field.
Sure, you bet. Well, so the reps, when we introduced Handshake, it was we gave them iPads and gave them Handshake at the same time. So we were answering the question on deployment of what are we going to do with this by saying, here's your iPad and here's the main application that you're going to be using.
Got it.
And so there was, needless to say, that the iPad itself as a tool is pretty easy to learn, hence its success. But what we found was that Handshake as well was very intuitive. It was very easy for the reps to understand. It wasn't introducing new language to their sales conversation that was perplexing. It was just really reorganizing and representing in a digital form a lot of the language and a lot of the tools and a lot of the workflow that they were already familiar with. And actually, what we discovered was, every sales rep who's been doing that role for any length of time has their wish list of, man, if I could build my own tools, this is what I would do differently. And as we were going through those first orientation sessions with Handshake, we could see the recognition on our very experienced sales team's face, like, oh man, It's finally something that does this, finally something that does that. And so, our confidence was really high very early on. And Glenn, as you know, we decided as innovators, as leading edge innovators, we said, okay, well, let's just really put this to the test. And so 2 days later, we were at our largest trade show of the year. It's the largest trade show that's held at the Anaheim Convention Center in Anaheim in the United States, just south of Los Angeles. About 100,000 people attended. It's called the NAMM Show.
Yep.
And it's a trade show for the music products industry. We have we do a lot of business. We launch probably 60% of our new products at the NAMM Show. Our sales reps are very busy. Each one of them is probably in the neighborhood of 100 different business appointments across the show. And so it's a really, really busy time. A little bit of a risk in introducing new technology, but we were so confident in the combination of iPad and Handshake that we said, you know what, let's just get to this. And what we found from the moment that we started writing orders was that we got a couple of immediate benefits. One, the appointments were just so much more efficient. We could see that the customers were surprised at just how organized and efficient the presentation was, and also, we were adding to the orders because things were just presented in a very natural context. The reps weren't forgetting products to add on to the order. The customers were getting confirmations right away, so by the time they got back to their hotel room at night, there was a confirmation email sitting in their inbox, and so just everything felt more professional, more organized, and more in line with our brand image, frankly.
Awesome. And kind of clicking over to the kind of Showpad side, I know that after Handshake was kind of the first kind of thing that you tackled on iPad, but then very soon after that you kind of got to how can I improve the presentation side of the meeting, because I know you guys spent a lot of time getting your product videos done and all that kind of advanced presentation material. How is having Showpad on the iPads for the reps kind of changed that part of the meeting, the presentation and the content driven part of the meeting?
Yeah, Showpad was a real natural extension to Handshake from a couple of perspectives. One, we'd had so much success in transferring the order writing, the order capturing, and confirmation process into Handshake on the iPad that I immediately, within weeks of having kind of come out of the NAMM show, I started to ask the question, okay, well, what's the other major piece of the reps workflow? And of course, it's the actual presentation itself. It's augmenting the mechanics of the order writing process with a more powerful and a more compelling storytelling element. And what we'd seen at the NAMM show as well, with all the wins that we'd had in moving the orders into Handshake, the reps still had a catalog full of brochures beside us. We've always in Roland, we've taken a lot of we've made a pretty big investment in creating what we call sales presenters for all of our big events. But the sales presenter at that NAMM show was still very much an analog experience. It was a binder that had documents in it. It was sequenced ahead of time so that we'd taken an element of control over how the sales presentation was going to go. We had a couple of videos that were on the iPad, but it was really quite an eclectic experience at that point. So it really became quite obvious that there must be a way to move the entire presentation, the storytelling part of the presentation, onto the iPad as well. And so I really recreated the same experience. I started Googling and went into the App Store looking for digital presenters or sales presenters. There was more selection at that time, but the range of solutions was much more diverse as well. And while there were lots of titles, those that were really focused on presenting within the context of the sales experience, the choices were more limited. And really much the same way, one solution started to stand out very quickly, and that was Showpad. And not coincidentally, for some of the same reasons. Rather than just being a standalone application, it was a more full-featured enterprise solution. It had cloud management and cloud storage in behind it. It had the ability to create different roles for different salespeople, and so I created a trial account, And it wasn't because Showpad was located in Europe. I can't say that it was within seconds, but certainly within 24 hours, I got a call, and the person who called me from Showpad said, "Is this the Roland that I'm thinking of?" And I said, "Yes." "Is this Glenn?" "No, it's not Glenn."
Wasn't
But sure enough, this person was a musician as well, and it just kind of took off from there.
Awesome. So one of the things that I'd love to get your insight on, Paul, and this is something that Louis, I'd like to hear your thoughts on as well. One of the challenges with trying to bring new tech to a sales team can often be around just getting adoption going. And Paul, you hinted at this in your kind of feedback that you'd seen other divisions of companies that you knew kind of throw the toy at the problem and not really understand what problem it was solving. And I just love to understand a little bit about, when you were trying to get your reps to use Handshake and Showpad, were there any things that you did that, you know, specifically to kind of get out in front of any adoption problems that you saw, Paul?
Yeah, and it largely is a reiteration of what I'd said earlier. Rather than just give them the tool, as you said, Glenn, honestly, we tried to adopt the same kinds of disciplines that we ask our salespeople to adopt when they're representing our products, which is, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? What is the efficiency that you're trying to gain? How are you trying to improve somebody's life? And then the product becomes the solution to that question. And so when we rolled out Handshake, as I said, it wasn't rolling out the iPad, the shiny object that we handed everybody. The iPad was a medium for delivering Handshake. And so, we are moving your order writing process and confirmation process into the digital domain. So here's an iPad and here's this app called Handshake, and the combination of the two are what will allow you to do that. And so
Got it.
we really eliminated a lot of ancillary questions by
Yep.
focusing the conversation on that one particular aspect of their life. And really, I think that was the biggest single win that we got, was by doing that.
Got it. So you created a lot of focus early on a particular use case, which I guess probably helped kind of minimize that distraction. That's awesome. Louis, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts as well. Obviously, you and I have both been through a lot of different kind of mobile deployments with a bunch of different companies. Do you have any thoughts to share with the people on the call about best ways to, help get people on board with the new technology?
No, thanks. I completely echo about what Paul said. I mean, we have a mantra in Showpad if we're onboarding customers or prospects, and that is to, if they start a Showpad project, is to start thinking big. I mean, they need to already start dreaming about the capabilities the solution has, but then to start really small. I mean, start with one use case. Start with 10 to 15 sales reps, and as those groups become successful, then scale smart. So I would definitely not recommend to throw it to your sales reps all at once, because that will be too disruptive. That will change their lives too much. I mean, many people don't really like change. So again, my advice would be is to think big, start small, and scale smart. And all the customers that we have that are successful with adoption are customers that thought that way, just like Paul did.
Awesome. Thanks. I'm just trying to think if I've got anything I can be helpful with on the call. I would say the one main thing, I totally agree with what you said, Louis, about focusing on the most important one thing first and just getting people to that. The other thing that I would suggest is, making sure, and usually companies themselves tend to do this pretty well, but just make sure that any training materials or any videos or anything that's being delivered to help the reps understand how to use the new technology are actually really tailored to their use case. So instead of a generic walkthrough of like, hey, this is how this thing works, it's like, no, this is how you're going to use it with this particular real customer example with your real products, and let's go through something that's very visceral and very relevant. I've just seen in our customer base, I've seen a big difference between training materials and prep that is actually drawn from their own experiences versus being generic. So I've seen that be very helpful as well. I've got a question here from the audience. We've talked a lot about the in-person today, but thinking about conversations that happen between the reps and their customers that happen kind of over email or the phone, how can we expect, the kind of outside rep or the outside rep who might get that call while they're not with the customer, or an inside rep who's in the office, what kind of additional value can we be expecting those folks to be providing? Louis, Paul, any thoughts on that?
Yes, so I think from our side, one of the things that we are doing is extending Showpad, not only we're making sure Showpad doesn't only exist for field selling solutions, but also when a sales rep is behind his desk doing remote selling, when he's emailing, and basically making sure that every location a sales rep is, he has access to the information that is relevant for the prospect. So that's how we want to solve it from our side, to be where our sales rep is and deliver that exact same value.
Got it. Paul, from your end, I was wondering if, for your team that's inside or, in the office, have you got any thoughts on, how you can help them improve the value they're offering during those calls? Paul, your mic may be off if you're talking.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yep, gotcha.
Okay, good, thank you. I would actually start by still focusing on the people that are outside the office. I think probably common in most salespeople's lives is that when they're driving between appointments, they're taking calls all the time on their car hands-free kit and whatnot, and for every visit they've got, they're probably having twice as many phone calls during the day. And what we found is that both in the case of Handshake and Showpad, they don't live outside of that phone call conversation or email conversation either. If the rep gets a phone call while they're driving, they'll pull over, they'll go have a coffee. Handshake will come out on their iPhone instead of their iPad. They'll capture the order. They'll send the confirmation. The confirmation will come into inside sales, all as one seamless process. It doesn't live outside the phone call. And so, customers are no doubt impressed that, I was just on the phone. I knew the guy was in his car, and here 10 minutes later, I've got a confirmation in my email. And Showpad, one of the features that we use all the time is the ability to clip content and email it on to the customer. It's fantastic for doing that. And so in the same way, the rep can be using Showpad as a reference during a phone call to build out their information. And as they're focusing on points, they can be clipping those different things, and by the time they leave the phone call, they've sent an email onto that customer. And both tools are fantastic for that.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Well, listen, everyone, we are at the top of the hour, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So we've got some. We've got the contact information of all the companies up on the screen. If you would like to talk to the folks at Showpad or our team about Handshake, the information's up on the screen. And again, thank you to Louis and Paul for taking the time today. It was super helpful, and always love talking to both of you. So thanks for making the time, and thanks to everyone for attending.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.